You're listening to the Getting Smart podcast. I'm Shawnee Caruthers. The traditional boundaries between high school, higher education, and the workforce are blurring. Integrating work-connected learning into high school curricula can bridge the gap between education and employment, making learning more relevant and engaging while setting students up for success in their future careers. So why is this conversation so important right now? As the pace of change accelerates, the need for adaptable, skilled workers who are ready to meet the demands of the modern economy has never been greater. Our students deserve an education that prepares them for the realities of the workforce and empowers them to reach their full potential. Today, we're joined by Carolyn Weir, Executive Director of the McClure Foundation and a driving member of the Vermont Accelerate Ed cohort, supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Accelerate Ed is built on the idea that high schools can provide early access to quality higher education in ways that incorporate work-connected learning and have long-term benefits for students. This initiative helps state-based groups plan and build accelerated pathways between K-12 education, post-secondary education, and careers. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, Shawnee. Great to be here with you.
So first, could you start by giving us an overview of the McClure Foundation's 13-year promise?
Sure. So Vermont's free degree promise is basically a fast-tracked pathway to a debt-free degree for all Vermont high school students. And it builds on the state of Vermont's longtime early college program for high school seniors. Since 2013, the state's early college program has been giving high school seniors in our state a jumpstart on their college pathways with a free year of college in lieu of a traditional senior year of high school. So for any student in Vermont who completes that program at the Community College of Vermont, we promise a second year of free college, along with living stipends and enhanced advising. And we made this promise to the Vermont high school classes of 2023 through 2026 because we really see fast-track debt-free pathways as a game changer for young people, especially young people of transition age who are furthest from opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So as you think of the students who are really diving into this opportunity, what is their motivation? How are you getting them to buy into this, to the 13-year promise?
So in order to answer that question, I should probably tell you a little bit about Vermont and about the McClure Foundation. So by a lot of measures, Vermont is the most rural state in the country. We have 65% of students living in rural areas. We have 76% of the state's 9 through 12 students attending rural high schools. And for a long time, Vermont's college continuation rates among high school graduates has been the lowest in New England. And that's true kind of no matter how you slice and dice it. It's true in the aggregate. It's also true among populations of students who stand to benefit the very most from a post-secondary credential. Low-income students of color, students with disabilities, male students are all among those populations who are facing the deepest equity gaps in terms of continuation rates. And our partners at the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation conduct aspiration surveys among high school students about their plans and their hopes for life after high school. And the data coming out this year is signaling some pretty rapid declines in college aspirations among youth since 2020. That's especially true among young men who would be first in family to pursue college. So there are a lot of kind of headwinds here that compel the McClure Foundation to think about how we can support young people of transition age as they plan and prep for life after high school. We are a longtime affiliate of the Vermont Community Foundation, and as a part of the family of funds and foundations at the Vermont Community Foundation, we do our part to close opportunity gaps in Vermont by making post-secondary education the easy choice for Vermonters, especially young Vermonters who are approaching high school graduation day. So in all of our work, we're trying to improve the pathways that lead to Vermont's most promising jobs through education and training. And Vermont has a lot of enabling conditions that make accelerated pathways that start in high school and put students on paths to public, career-connected post-secondary education a really good investment. So that's been our focus in a lot of ways over the past decade, and we're doubling down in that mission. So generally, as a philanthropic organization, we are looking to fund good ideas and accompany them or kind of move with them until they reach a point of successful scale. And then at that point, we want to do our part to help communicate their impact and the insights that they're generating in ways that are going to help inform the systems that support schools and the systems that support students. And in some cases, that looks like public policy or a new public perception or a really well-scaled program. And over the past many years, we have had experience doing that around issues like incarcerated education and creative or innovative pathways to teacher licensure, especially in really rural parts of our state. But the biggest part of our portfolio right now, the cornerstone of our work, is this free degree promise, because we really feel like young people deserve to believe that their futures in Vermont are destinations of value and that college is within reach for them.
I really appreciate this conversation as we think about young people who are furthest away from opportunities. We sometimes forget that students who live in rural communities are really amongst that group, those groups as well. And the opportunities that you all are providing them gives them more access. And was that your true motivation for the foundation to launch this initiative, or was there something else that kind of was layered on top of this? And also, how many students are going through this program annually?
I would say that's a big part of our motivation, right? We bring this asset-based belief to our work that rural is an asset, especially when it comes to youth development, to young people feeling seen and supported. That's especially true in a rural community, right? And in a small school. Vermont has a lot of enabling conditions that can support accelerated pathways building, right? We have a really resourced public K-12 education system. We have longstanding policy in place that supports these flexible and accelerated pathways to high school graduation. We have a single community college in our state, has 12 different locations around the state and a really long history of online learning and a decade of experience serving high school students in raising their aspirations for college and for career training. And we have, I think, a really well-coordinated group of funders associated with the Community Foundation that are helping think at a systems level about what it takes to create the conditions for young people growing up here, especially those furthest from opportunity, to feel hopeful about their futures here and the future of their communities here. And in that thinking, in that strategic framework at the Vermont Community Foundation, the role of college and career training and education equity is really central. We see it as a huge lever, especially accelerated pathways. It has been really affirming for us in this decision to commit to the Vermont Free Degree Promise to see two things. The first, I think, answers your question about scale. And the second gets us back to that Accelerate Ed community resourced and envisioned by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we are like 2 years into this initial 5-year of the Vermont Free Degree Promise commitment. And we're sharing what we're learning and seeing along the way. And one of the things that we have been really excited to see is a shift in the enrollment footprint and in the equity makeup, the demographics of that cohort. So 2 years in to the program, we are seeing about 235 students enrolling in the program. That's the equivalent of maybe Vermont's 4th or 5th largest senior class. And that cohort comes from over 90% of Vermont's high schools. We have a lot of high schools in this state, right? It's a rural context. And that cohort marks about a 70% increase in the enrollment in early college since the Free Degree Promise was announced. That's enrollment at the Community College of Vermont. And that in and of itself would not get us closer to our North Star goal if the makeup of that student cohort wasn't more equitable. But that's the thing that we're tracking most closely and are really encouraged to see that it is. We are seeing a significant increase in both the percentage and number of low-income students. The percentage of students of color enrolled in the program significantly outpaces the percentage of students of color in the general Vermont K-12 population, and we're seeing double the number of first-generation students. So the students who stand to benefit the most from a credential, who historically have under-enrolled, are the ones that are now being supported to start on these accelerated pathways early. So that's giving us some confidence. And then I think this invitation to join the national accelerated community as a place-based intermediary building and equitably scaling these accelerated pathways has also affirmed that this is a strategy that is being recognized nationally in places all across the country as a way to support youth development, youth success, and educational attainment equity.
Yeah, I just love, and I'm going to jump to the pathways component in just a minute, but I just love how you all are measuring like aspirations and hope, and just thinking through like the commitment that you all are making to young people to really stay in Vermont and to really value the place that they're in. And one of the ways it sounds like you all are doing that is through like really emphasizing the pathways that you've been talking about. And this initiative specifically emphasizes those pathways to lead to high paying, in demand jobs. So can you discuss how these pathways were selected? And then what is the role of Vermont's Most Promising Jobs campaign? What role that had in really shaping these decisions?
So the team of organizations that participated in this Accelerate Ed community this past year included some K-12 partners, some higher ed partners, state government, philanthropy, and we all came together to identify some core values. Rural as an asset is one of those values, and I've already mentioned it in this conversation. Another value that we named is universality, and it's really important in a couple of design ways as a part of this initiative. The first is that all students are eligible for the free degree promise, including undocumented students. The other way that universality is really important for us in the Vermont context is that students can choose any degree program available at the Community College of Vermont. CCV has 12 degree programs, and they're all aligned with labor market needs. So in order to successfully and equitably scale enrollment in these pathways, we really believe that students need to be able to choose the paths that interest them, right? When we sit down with young people to understand what they want and need, they tell us they want and need agency to choose the pathways and the career pathways that work for them. So our state already has pretty highly supported pathways to critical occupations like nursing. And through this initiative, we really want young people to hear that college is within reach no matter what degree program they're interested in. But as I mentioned, the 12 degree programs available through our state's community college system are all aligned with labor market needs. So the accounting degree is a good example. Vermont is predicted to have over 2,500 accountants and auditors in the next 10 years. All of those jobs pay a median salary of about $70,000 a year, maybe a little more now with wage pressures, which is well over the state median wage. And the associate degree in accounting is nested with the bachelor's degree in accounting that can lead to CPA credentials and other higher paying jobs in the finance field. And I think, Shawnee, that this conversation also touches on why associate degrees are the credential that we're circling around here, that we see as such a valuable credential in this work. It's a question we get a lot, and it's a question that I really love, actually, because it brings up a couple of things. The first is that it was so important to us in this Free Degree Promise initiative to partner with our state's community college. It's where the majority of Vermonters go to college. It's the state that enrolls the largest number of Vermonters from low-income backgrounds. And we believe that community colleges, no matter where they are, engines of economic mobility. We chose associate degrees as the credential of choice in the Promise pathway, not only because Vermont has great seamless transfer pathways, and this Promise can buy down the cost of a bachelor's degree, but also because the value of an associate degree as a terminal credential is really high in the state. When we were in the process of the early implementation phases of this Promise, Strata came out with national research that says that associate degree graduates in Vermont are actually most likely in the country to achieve a positive ROI. And I think when I take a step back and think about our portfolio as a whole, as a grant maker, community college is the cornerstone. They're a cornerstone partner. And we're really proud, along with the Vermont Community Foundation, to buck this trend in philanthropy, which is that community colleges historically receive something like 2% of philanthropic funding nationally, while they're serving close to 50% of college students statewide. We saw that stat a number of years ago, and I'm really glad to see. I think the tide is turning. But community colleges, I think, have long been under-recognized for the work they do for and with students for this from opportunity. And so we're glad that they've always played kind of an outsized role in our work.
Yeah, it sounds like you all are really focused on the inclusivity of it all. Again, as you think about the role, and then you mentioned that this program is also available to undocumented students, and so you all have found a way to increase the equity at all levels, and I think that's pretty amazing. As you think about, because you can't do this alone, I know that to be true, and you all are doing great work, but it does take an ecosystem. And so, what role do partnerships play in the success of the 13th year promise?
Partnerships are huge, right? And this is why I was really encouraged to see the structure of this accelerated learning community nationally. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and ESG have invited a couple of waves of place-based intermediaries into a learning community together. And all of those intermediaries are working with local partners. We, the McClure Foundation, happens to be the intermediary here in Vermont that was invited into the accelerated cohort. But along with us came so many partners from public higher ed and K-12 and state government and other philanthropies. And it's been interesting to think about the role of philanthropy in particular as an intermediary, right? Intermediaries can take all sorts of forms. Some of them are higher ed institutions, some of them are state agencies, some of them are like true collective impact organizations and structures. We believe that philanthropy can be a really important convener and connector, especially for accelerated pathways, development, and scaling. And I'm seeing that as true at the national level in the ways in which the accelerated community is convening those of us working on this place-based work that is so informed by local state policy and local enabling conditions, but has a lot of through lines that allow us to learn from each other. But I'm also seeing it play out in the place-based context, right? And this is where I think community foundations can play a particular role because their job is to have the connections and the knowledge and the resources to have deep insight about local needs and opportunities. And so a lot of community foundations or their affiliates can play really important intermediary roles that go way beyond the grant check, right? So can do things like research and data collection and convening and like agenda setting or consensus building, and can communicate impacts and insights, right? We're positioned to take the long view and to nurture systems capacity and readiness and to take risks. And in Vermont, I've seen that happen with our flood response and recovery work. The waves of flood events that our state is experiencing have taken us by surprise and required deep coordination and response. But we're also really glad to see it in the accelerated pathways work as well, because that work sits at the nexus of so many complex systems that are all informed by different state policy and funding sources and institutional players, right? We're at the nexus of K-12 and public higher ed and workforce development and have to figure out how to build pathways and systems that work for students and are also workable for the systems that are participating in and serving parts of those pathways.
Yes, and it's sounds like you all are using then those partnerships, because I know that sometimes when you're a foundation, you sometimes struggle to determine what is it that you're really going to like narrow in on, right? Because there are so many great needs that are happening, but it sounds like you're really using your partnerships and your space of being like a convener to really use the data in order to figure out how to make the most impact. But I also know this does not come without its challenges. And so I'm sure you maybe hit some bumps along the way. So as you think about the challenges that the foundation has encountered in the implementation of this 13-year promise, what are some of those challenges that you encounter? And then what were some of the strategies that you all were able to use to really adjust to continue to make an impact in response?
I love that question. There has been a real continuous improvement frame to the early implementation years of this Promise Initiative, and we've learned a lot along the way. I think the first is that we collectively made a common mistake that adults make, which is to assume what young people want and need. And this particular cohort of young people coming out of the pandemic, making a brave choice in their senior year to participate in a non-traditional pathway and get a jumpstart on their college experience. I mentioned it's the equivalent of maybe the fourth or fifth largest Vermont high school senior class, drawing from over 90% of Vermont high schools. That means a very geographically distributed cohort. So one of the things we heard loudly and clearly from participating students is that they were hungry for a stronger culture of belonging as part of a cohort that they knew they were a part of, but it was hard to feel, at least for some of them, hard to feel like they were a part of because they were choosing maybe a distanced or hybrid learning option. They were enrolled among only a handful of students from their particular high school. And so that's really great for us to hear, right? And in response, in coordination with the Community College of Vermont, we've made significant investments in what a culture of belonging looks and feels like for incoming students over the term of their 2 years as community college students. And I think alongside that learning, we also learned in our efforts to really drive equitable awareness of these accelerated pathways among students, especially students from the populations we see as standing to benefit the most from a fast-tracked free associate degree, that we were using not only the wrong messages, but also the wrong messengers, right? Clearly, what we're learning here in Vermont is something that I'm sure other places and other states have known or are learning right now, which is that near peers are really good ambassadors. In year 2 of this initiative, we actually created something of a work study position at the community college for current students on the pathway to be paid and trained student ambassadors so that they can support current students and reach out to their near peers to help them understand what their experience is like really candidly. The things about it that are great, the things about it that are hard to adjust to, and are hopeful that really investing in that near peer voice, and again, giving participating students who want it the agency to do that work will support this equitable enrollment goal that we have as a team.
Yeah. And if you have some great ambassadors, then that means you must have some great student success stories. You have one or two that you would love to share?
Yeah, I have 2 that come to mind. So the first is a young man named Donovan. Donovan just completed his early college year this past spring, and he is a really small Vermont town that has a really small high school. It's up near the border with Canada. This town actually only has one grocery store, and it's a grocery store that's managed by a regional health nonprofit. And working at that grocery store, doing all the things that high school kids do when they're employed at grocery stores. And it was his, part-time job as a teenager. He had his school counselor reflected to him in his junior year that he was really good at math and had exhausted a lot of the math courses available at his high school, and encouraged him to consider the early college program at the Community College of Vermont as an option for his senior year. And at first, Donovan, I think, was nervous about considering such an alternative experience. And then he did some research and talked to some folks and got really excited about what the experience at CCV would mean for him, because he would be in classes with accounting students and folks who have been in the accounting field, incumbent workers who had a lot of life experience to offer him. So he enrolled in early college to start his degree in accounting. And as a part of his 100-hour internship as a community college student, he actually interned with that regional health nonprofit and their accounting team. So Donovan was able to create this incredible value exchange between his work and his learning. He was still doing some part-time paid shifts at that grocery store. And then he would go upstairs to work with the accounting team that helped run the books for that grocery store, among other regional health efforts in his community. And he was taking community college classes, where he said he connected with students who both thought it was so cool that as a 17-year-old, he already knew that he had an interest in the field and would have a debt-free degree at age 19, which he says is like a really big win for me, but also knew that he had some built-in advising and support from folks who worked all across the accounting field in Vermont to help him think about the type of work environment and experience he actually wants to pursue. So when we think about what equitable scale looks like in a rural context, it's really about figuring out how to support Donovans in every Vermont community who all have different career hopes or explorations, or in different phases of their own personal journeys, and figuring out the roles that they want work to play in their lives. So there's Donovan, and then I think about Lucas. Lucas also just finished his early college year as a new American student. And I spoke with him in the middle of his early college year, asking him to reflect on what the experience was like and what it was like to choose the early college program in Vermont. And he said that he actually loved high school and would have wanted to stay in his high school. His choice to pursue early college wasn't because he had exhausted the academic options or had been with those students since kindergarten and was socially ready to move on. He actually said, I thought I might lose a little bit of a quote normal senior year experience, but for something greater. He said, and I love this quote, he said, your older self is going to be so proud of your younger self for taking the chance. Everyone has a future version of themselves, and early college lets you create it. So I hear that and I think back to how to design these pathways that really do give young people the agency to make choices for themselves that meet their aspirations and their values and their interests. And that's a lot of what the Vermont Flexible Pathways Bill is all about. The early college program is in that bill, but so too are mandated personalized learning plans for students between 7th and 12th grade, better access to career and technical education, access to endorsed work-based learning coordinators at high schools, and 2 free dual enrollment classes for 11th and 12th grade. So I think it's really wonderful here in Vermont that the state has defined so many pathways to and through high school graduation that work for students alongside a traditional senior year experience, which is probably the choice that works for the majority of students.
Oh my gosh, just this notion of taking a student's current job and then amping it up by looking at a different component within that company to then offer an internship is just so seamless and so smart. Yeah, I love that so much. As you look ahead, so look into like your crystal ball, but as you look ahead, how do you see the 13th year promise evolving? Are there any plans to expand or modify the program based on the data that you've been able to capture?
So I would say that focus on continuous improvement is at the forefront, right? We're working really closely with our partners to assess whether and how this is working for students and other partners and modify as needed. But I think we have 2 goals coming out of our participation in the Accelerate Ed community. And one is about equitable scale, right? Continuing to make sure that if participation in this pathway is growing, it's growing among students from low-income backgrounds, students of color, students who are first in their family to pursue college, and young men, which is a new equity frame for us. And I think folks who have worked traditionally in the gender equity field have deep understanding and competencies for supporting the needs of women and girls. And we do that in a lot of ways as a grant maker. Those who are steeped in the gender connected equity issues in education, I think recognize in a different way that there are some particular needs facing boys and young men that we need to get curious about. And so we are getting curious and following the data to figure out, okay, how do we build these pathways that work for them? Because right now, or at least historically, it's close to 70% of the students who are enrolling in these pathways are young women. So how can we build pathways that better serve their male peers too? And then I think the second goal is that if this promise initiative and the set of pathways that it has created for young people in Vermont turns out to be the game changer we think it is in terms of that equitable enrollment piece, then we have this question, right? As a foundation, we have made the commitment we can make, which was a 5-year commitment through the Vermont high school class of 2026. And if the initiative proves successful, we hope the state takes notice and thinks about making the free degree promise permanent with a commitment from its general fund. And because this is such a high leverage opportunity that builds on early college before students reach high school graduation day and pulls on a lot of state and federal funding for that second year, it's actually going to take a pretty minimal investment to ensure that these fast-tracked college degrees remain within reach for Vermont's young people.
Yeah, and so as Vermont's program continues to grow and you all are taking notice, other states will also begin to take notice. Based on your experience, what advice would you give other states or organizations looking to implement similar programs, or as you call it, get curious?
I really subscribe to the Accelerate Ed approach of finding a strong intermediary who can hold all of those extra functions like research and strategy setting and convening and consensus building. And then we have gained so much from starting with our enabling conditions, starting with the things and the conditions that are going well and working in our favor as a state, and figuring out what our core values are as a team in a way that really recognizes those enabling conditions and keeps us focused on a set of positive beliefs that help us stay hopeful while we're working to create the conditions for young people and the place where we live to feel hopeful too.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just want to say, like, Donovan and Lucas's name one more time, just because I know that when we keep young people at the center of the work and we continue to speak their names, that we remember why the work matters. And so I know there are other countless, I'm sure, stories that you can tell about other young people. So just really appreciate you sharing their stories and sharing more about the 13-year promise and the great work that Vermont is doing as a state to ensure inclusive education for all learners. So thank you for joining us today, Carolyn, on the Getting Smart podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.